So I wanted to talk to you about how I went through a year in the cloud, essentially. How I switched from using a Mac or a PC or a regular computer to a cloud-based computer using Web 2.0 tools. So I did that because I had originally been a Mac person forever. As they say, I drank the Kool-Aid. Whatever Steve Jobs said was gospel to me. So that was for years, since the late 90s. That's the only computer we ever had in our house. So I loved it. I did everything in the iSuite, iWork, iMovie, iLife, the whole deal. Everything we did in our house and in my work was via Mac, and that was bucking the trend. I was in districts that use PCs, so I was always the guy on the outside with the Apple. And as you know, based upon iPod and iPad and all those different iPhone things, things have really shifted in the way of Apple. So it's now much of a more mainstream type of computer. But back when I first began, it was pretty much on the outskirts. So we were really pushing the envelope, trying to get Macs back into schools in the early 2000s and like 2005, 2006. So I was one of those people that drank the Kool-Aid. So I loved Mac stuff. And I also started experimenting with different types of Linux. I had old machines in my house or in my districts that were aging and needed upgrades, and we didn't really have a lot of money, so we started experimenting with those. But I also, around 2010, I took a job in a district that was primarily PC, and my Mac at home was aging, and the computer that they offered me as my personal laptop for the district was a PC. When I asked for a Mac, they flatly said no, that we're not a Mac place. So I went to Linux. I converted that computer they gave me to a Linux machine and tried that and tinkered with that, but I realized that wasn't really going to work too well. And that PC that they gave me was really old. So I had converted it to the Linux type, and it was working okay, but it really wasn't the solution I wanted, and I was about to give in and go PC when something came in to the picture. Google had experimented with different types of operating systems, and some of the Linux builds that I had played with had been called Google OS, but they weren't made by Google. So Google came in October of 2011 with the Chromebook, which, as you see, this is one of the first models that came out. This was the Samsung 500, I think it was called. And it was completely cloud-based, meaning that it relied solely on the web to deliver any kind of software that it used. You couldn't load software on it. There was no CD drive or anything like that. And it was the first web-centric computer that was out there. So I grabbed one, and I swore that I was going to make it my sole computer, that I was not going to rely on software that I had to load or install. It was going to be, platform agnostic, as I was saying. And there was very little hard drive on it, in regards that there was no, spinning disk inside of it that I could store information on. I think there was about 16 gigabytes, which is about the size of most of our phones in terms of storage. So what that meant was everything I was storing had to be in the cloud. So I had to use Google Drive. At that time, I think it was just called Google Docs. And I had to use that for everything I did, which was a pretty far-fetched idea to many people, even in 2011. The web had come a long way to that point, and that's why Google was able to do it. But even still, some people were very, very skeptical about storing things in the cloud. And it kept, in making this switch, I kept having to ask myself as I was going through these processes, is why do we use computers? And what was the reason I was using this device or that device, an Apple, a PC, or a Mac? And I came to a couple conclusions. One was that we use these things to do work, to have the work that we want to work on wherever we are. And the Chromebook solved that. And having the web as a platform solved that too. Wherever I was, there was my stuff. So that was unbelievable to me, that I could have this. And then how do we use these things? One of the big concerns people had initially was, well, if you switch to a web-centric device, what about when you don't have the wireless? And there was no Ethernet port on these computers, so it was just you had wireless or you had nothing. So my initial solution was, well, I'll get one that has a 3G modem in it. So I did. I got one that had a cellular modem in it, so I'd always have access to the internet. I'd have to pay for it when I was out of wireless, but I still had access. But the other thing was, I really started looking at my usage pattern and started thinking, when am I ever not in wireless? What are situations where I'm not, in a place that has free wireless, or at least wireless that I can connect to? And there were very, very little examples I could think of that I was ever stuck without wireless. So that made it a pretty easy switch there. I also started asking, what couldn't I do in a browser? What were some of the activities that I did in terms of workflow that weren't web-based? And again, there were very few things. A couple of years ago, I used to do a lot more movie editing and video editing, and that I thought was a problem, but I realized I didn't do much of it anymore. Nor did I do heavy image manipulation or anything like that, or any kind of programming or things like that that would require intensive processor power or internal power for the computer. What I did mostly was email, web browsing, web research, and writing, which I could do entirely through a browser-based system. So then one of the hobbies I started looking back at was, how did this all come about, and the evolution of the web as a platform. And really, when I started getting into educational technology around 2004, 2005, this was my big idea. Like, eventually we're going to, not have the need for, servers and things like that inside of our schools, and we're going to go out there and do things, on the web. And so I tried in those early days to make it happen, but it was really a struggle. So some of the things that we struggled with were solved by Web 2.0. But Web 2.0, as you're starting to read about in your notes there, you will in a couple days, it was, in its infancy. You're looking at some examples here that are some of the earlier Web 2.0 tools that were out there. And it's changed so much. I'm looking at these and I'm thinking, I probably have accounts at just about all of these. And they're probably, sitting there unused. But Web 2.0 was the bridge between that went from the original web, which, was very one way, where you had people creating content and other people reading content on the web. Then Web 2.0 arrived and said, well, now anybody can create content. You don't have to be a programmer, or you don't have to be a computer scientist. We're going to give those tools to everybody. So that's what Web 2.0 did, and it also started to open up this idea of the web as a platform, or as an operating system. One of the first examples I saw of this was from a guy named Mark Erbe, E-R-B-E, I think his last name was, and he was the director of technology for Kutztown High School, or Kutztown Schools in Pennsylvania. He came to a meeting I was at, and he showed us this tool called Ifttt, where you could have a group of kids in a classroom using this program called Ifttt, and you can see it on that screen there, the various colors that are on the screen. Each kid was a different color, or each group of kids was a different color on that screen, one document, where they could all edit it. Now, we take this for granted now because we use Google Docs and Google Drive and all those things. But back in this was 2006, I think this is when I first saw this. It was amazing. You could have that many people working on one document, and you could see them type live, and it was unbelievable. Now, what was interesting was Ifttt was the same technology was used by this company called Etherpad, and Etherpad was the next step in this evolution of collaborative writing. And Etherpad I loved because it was live in real time. Google Docs at this point had been born as well, but you couldn't see everyone's writing in real time. There was a delay, so I could type a sentence, and then 5 seconds later you might see it. Whereas Etherpad, you could see that the letters going across the screen, much like we do now. So obviously, Etherpad was bought by Google, and that technology is now absorbed into Google Docs. But back then, this was that idea where many of us could jump on a document together and create together. It was really wild, and I remember using this with kids in like 2007 and having them be just so blown away. The other really cool feature of Etherpad, and they had another one out there using the same technology called PiratePad, was this time slider at the end of your document where you could play it forwards and backwards and see how the document was created and where the writing occurred. I really loved that feature, and I don't think Google Docs has really incorporated it fully into what they do. I wish they would. But so Etherpad was a really neat step in that evolution of being able to collaboratively edit documents and save them online. Now, video editing is a different story. Back in the day, there was a tool out there called Jump Cut. And Jump Cut, and there was another one, I forget what it was called, but they were video editors where you could actually do what you did in iMovie or in Movie Maker online. And they were so ambitious, and they really thought it was going to work well, and so did I. But I remember sitting there working with teachers waiting for hours for their video to upload. I was working with a field hockey coach, and she wanted to do highlight reels for her players to send off to colleges, and it just didn't work because it took forever to upload upload the video before we could even edit it. So we both abandoned the project and went to something more traditional, like iMovie, I think. But this was a step in that direction. We've now moved into some other pieces, something called WeVideo, which is an amazing tool, which allows you to do this much, much quicker. Picnic was another one. A lot of people were in the habit of using Photoshop to manipulate images and things like that. Picnic sought to do that on the web. So you could upload an image and you could apply some primitive editing features to it, and even some cropping and things like that right in Picnic, and then export the image to a different program or print it out, whatever you wanted to do. And Picnic was bought by Google and incorporated into Picasa. So as you can see, Google is kind of swarming in on these startup companies that do these really cool things. But they all do it. And Picnic is still around. If you use Picasa, you edit your pictures in Picnic. And the other one that really came around in the mid-2000s to bring up this idea of web as platform was Wiki. Wikis were used to collaboratively edit a web page. Many people could edit a web page, and they could create content right on that page. The problem with wikis was that same thing as we were talking about before. Many people could not edit one page at the same time, and if they did, sometimes their edits would get lost. But as a way for like a bucket to hold content, wikis were unbelievable. And if I showed you my list of wikis that I did with teachers in 2007, 2006, 2007, 2008, it would blow you away. We did wikis for everything. Kids were building content on wikis all the time. Really powerful tool. And again, it started saying that, if we want to create things, we don't need to be programmers. We just need to know how to use a text editor, as you can see right here on the screen. So Wikispaces was the tool that we used, and it was, WikiWiki is Hawaiian for super fast. So that was the idea behind wiki technology, that it was a super fast way to create any kind of content on the web. So when in doing all this, I started thinking about the working with teachers, especially that video example. We had to find the sweet spot between technology working really well and the engagement level of it not being too difficult right here in that flow channel. If we started to get up here or we started to get down here, either working with teachers or students, if it was too hard, they would give up. If it was too easy, they would also not be too interested in it because it probably didn't offer them a significant return on the investment. So we started looking for tools that fit right in this middle here. And for me, those tools were always web-based. And the Chromebook has really solved that problem and has really made working on the web a no-brainer for me. And I really don't use any other computer than a Chromebook unless there's an application that we have to run for testing purposes that I'll use. So again, Chromebooks are really simple. If you brought these to a computer designer or manufacturer, they would say these are really simple pieces. There's not much to them. Simple to use. Everything you've probably seen before, Google tools and things like that are all there. What did I get rid of? I got rid of Microsoft Office. I haven't used that in quite some time. Most, if not all, of the editing features within Microsoft Office you can now do in Google Docs through some of their add-ons and some of the advanced features that they've created over the last couple of years. Also got rid of iTunes. I now use a cloud-based service, Google Play Music. And I used to use things like Pandora and Spotify as well. They were just simple to use, and I find I don't own music like I used to own music. And I don't play music from a device that only plays music. I play music from a device that I can hook into other systems in my house, a laptop, a cellular phone, or a tablet, all of which do many, many functions rather than just a CD player. Also got rid of Keynote, the iWork suite. Keynote is one of the programs I really loved and was probably the one I missed the most. But there are other options out there that are web-based. There's Google Slides, obviously, but there's also things like Prezi. There's things like 280 Slides, Slide Rocket. There are some really rich, really nice-looking options for you to create presentations online. Also Jing, and this was something when I originally created this presentation that I didn't have access to, but Jing is a screencasting tool where you can record your voice and your screen, and that's what I'm looking at and that's what I'm doing right now. I'm screencasting, but I'm doing it from my Chromebook. Originally Chromebooks were not able to do it, but the technology has caught up. Companies like TechSmith, who makes Jing, allow you to screencast, and it's right there. It took a little while, but we're back. All right. Skype also. We can't Skype on a Chromebook, but you can Skype on other web-centric devices like a tablet or a cellular phone. But you can use Google Hangouts on a Chromebook, which is pretty much the same as Skype. That allows you some feature-rich tools as well. What I did add were Google Apps. As you guys all know, in my grad class here, we are pretty much centered around Google Apps and using our Google Drive for most of the work that we do. We added Google Drive as the main component of that. All right, and then as I said before, I switched over to Google Play Music, where that's the majority of the music I have. I have uploaded to Google Play Music, and I can access it from anywhere I am that I have internet access, which is pretty much everywhere. And Google Plus, which is another social network that kind of fits into Twitter, Facebook, and all of that. It has a niche for me as a lot more academic. But again, it's a Web 2.0 tool where there's content creation from all angles, and social, the circle aspect in Google Plus is really neat, where you can share specific content with specific groups of people that are like-minded. All right, and then when we think about processing information, how do we've talked about this at length in this class, is we are overcome with information flow. There's so much out there. How do we take it in, and what do we do with it? So I've been using a couple different tools that are, of course, are web-based to do this. We have to have a way to manage our workflow, and for me, a lot of it is Google-based, but there's some other tools I think that are fantastic. Gmail is really the hub of everything I do. All my mail accounts from everywhere I route into one Gmail account, and I sort it by folder, and work with it that way. So Gmail really begins that process for me. And again, Gmail came out of Google's productivity suite, or a project that they had a couple years ago, and it really isn't necessarily a Web 2.0 tool, but it fits within that ecosystem. And again, Drive is my other hub. There are so many different add-ons to Google Drive now that you can do pretty much everything from documents, to doing Gantt project outlines, to mind maps. It houses all my video and images now as well because of the amount of storage that they give you for free. I also use something called Buffer, which allows me to schedule when I send tweets out so that I can, make sure that they're timed with whatever it is I want to have out there. If I'm presenting at a conference, I'll often set up a bunch of tweets to go out right around the time I'm presenting that have to do with my my presentation, so I can help control what's being sent out there. Google Reader used to be around. It's no longer out there. It used to be a place where all of my feeds from the different blogs that I came into, that I read, would come into. But Google has killed it. It's no longer around. So I guess they're thinking most people are doing reading on the web now directly and not housing feeds. But it used to be a pretty neat thing. And Evernote. We've looked at Evernote in our class, and some of you have used it with Dr. Friedlander, but it's a fantastic place to house content that you're doing targeted research on. You can have folders within Evernote where you can put information about the research that you're doing, PDFs, images, tons of stuff out there. And then what I'm really into now is this thing called Ifttt, then that, ifttt.com. And it allows you to automate the web. So you can have actions occur if other actions occur on the web. For example, every time I post to Google+, any kind of post that I put out there, information sharing, observations I make, Ifttt, they're called recipes. I set up a recipe so that every time I post something to Google+, it automatically gets pushed out to Twitter, so that I don't have to post it in two places. There's tons of other recipes out there, but Ifttt is a Web 2.0 application where it just allows you to control the web. I love it. If you have time to explore it, please do. ifttt.com. All right, so this is an old slide here. I'm going to jump through that so we can be done with it. But so there you get the idea about how cloud computing at least has evolved for me. So I want you to think about that as you go through and look at what Web 2.0 is.